So when are you going to retire? You having too much fun?
No. If I thought I had the money, I would. If somebody said, Lynn, if right now you said, Lynn, I am here from the heavens to say, we have now looked at all your finances, we've gone through your worst case scenarios, like if you need 24-hour care starting tonight, and actually you're in shape.
Here we go. Alex. 12, 3, 2, 1, 2.
Coming to you live from the Chicago Sun-Times headquarters in the West Loop, it's election eve. It's the Illinois primary is Tuesday. Candidates are in the final stretch to get out the voters. Welcome to our very first Sun-Times election show. I'm Lynn Sweet, the Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief. We're going to be joined by a panel of experts for information and analysis. We're going to give you a preview of the big storylines that may emerge from the Tuesday vote. What could those storylines be? Well, one of the things I want to know on the Democratic side, who's going to win, the progressive or the establishment Democrats? On the Republican side, it's the flip of the same coin. Who's going to win, the Trump Republicans or the Rauner Republicans? First, though, let's talk about turnout. Every sign points to a more robust turnout in this Illinois midterm election than we've had in past years, and there's no one better around to help me analyze this trend than Cook County Clerk David Orr. David, welcome to our very first Sun-Times show. So everyone knows, I've covered David for years, since you were an alderman.
Many years.
And I know this 2018 marks your last election that you will be presiding over as Cook County Clerk. So, all the best to you next year when you could just watch this as a bystander. But right now, you have some pretty interesting statistic that your office, which people should know, covers suburban Cook County. You've got a lot of real interesting statistics about what's going on in the early vote. So tell me a little bit about what you see going on both in the number of people voting and because you could figure out the demographics, who are they?
Okay, well, the key about numbers is we see a dramatic increase in early voting. Okay, we broke records, which is very significant. We have a higher turnout than normal in mail voting. And if you look at the early voting, one of the interesting numbers, besides 84% of all that number being from 45 and up in terms of age, and also female, 54% to 45%. But besides that, 80% of all the early voters in suburban Cook alone, are taking a Democratic ballot.
Okay, let's absorb that. 80%, almost 80% early vote. Do you, by chance, have any comparison in past years? Is this kind of how it always has been?
No, I don't have the numbers before, but it's not like it always is. Suburban Cook used to be more of a Republican area, and that's been changing. What I think, my best guess on this is, it's not the Republicans aren't voting, they're just not voting in the robust, enthusiastic way the Democrats are. So some people would say, oh, well, Republicans are taking Democratic ballots to vote Barrios out. I don't think so. I think it's just all the excitement you've seen around the country so far, which you've covered over and over again, is here in Cook County, and it's also being generated by the hot contests that we have in the Democratic Party.
So what would you think are the hottest ones that might prompt voter turnout?
Well, the hottest are clearly governor and Cook County assessor, by far.
Isn't it? So it's interesting. Sometimes people in Washington say, oh, everybody must be interested in, obviously, the governor. I say, well, politics are local.
Absolutely. Obviously, the Attorney General race, we have like 8 different Democratic candidates.
Right.
But this assessor race is knocking people's socks off, and it seems to generate so much excitement that the other candidates, Attorney General candidates, governor candidates, they keep talking about the assessor's race, trying to win points that way. So in this case, I do think you'll see the progressive winning. I don't know, governor's going to be close, but I think the progressive wins.
So we're going to pivot for a second. I want to get back to some early vote questions. Okay. But David Orr is a representative of the progressive wing of the progressive wing in Illinois politics for many years now.
I'd like to see alternatives to the traditional machine,
yes. Right. On it. So do you see any sign yet that all the talk we have seen of this post-Trump Democratic uprising, the indivisibles, the resistance, our revolution, people that I know a lot of your allies are involved in on it. Do you think some of this early vote number is a result of people who usually never vote coming in early, or just people who choose now as a matter of convenience to vote early?
It's certainly partly convenience, but I think it's more than that. I think it's a spirit, and I do think the what you might call the more progressive side is more excited at the moment, and you see that in some of the races, you see it in some of the candidates. So yes, that's partly driving it. How much it affects turnout, we don't know yet, but turnout will clearly be dramatically up over 4 years ago.
Wow. Now, I know you're able to figure out some other demographics. What could you tell us about gender? Who's voting more in the early vote?
Well, like I said before, it's about 54%, a little more than that, versus 45% for men. So there's quite a few more early votes coming from women. Now, male, I haven't seen the numbers yet. It might be a similar factor there. And as for age, young people don't tend to vote early nearly as much because they tend to vote on election day.
See, now that's interesting, because I would have guessed that young people would be the ones, young by whatever definition we have of young, which is 3 days younger than David and me. But I would have thought that somebody who would have known how to look up where to go to early vote, and who wouldn't want to be bound by something as, why do I have to do this on one day thing. So that's
well,
not
they certainly do that, because
yeah.
we saw a dramatic surge in online registration from young people using their phones. But in this particular case, we don't know yet whether or not there's going to be a dramatic turnout in young people yet.
Okay, so clarify something I'm not sure about in a new law in Illinois. Can you register on the same day or not? Could you explain to everybody what's going on there so they know on Tuesday, if they haven't done anything yet, what their options are?
Yes, in Illinois, we recently passed Election Day registration. That means on Tuesday, Election Day, anybody can go into their home precinct. That's the key. Not an early voting site, into their home precinct where they can register and vote. Just like a normal registration, they bring 2 pieces of identification, one of them with their current address on it, and then they can register and vote at the same time.
So this is important, people. If you're kind of late to the game here and you're not sure if you were going to vote tomorrow or not, and then you think, well, gee, I never registered. It's a new set of rules in 2018. So David, I just want to emphasize, if you have not registered, if you know nothing about the process except you're tuning in for the first time now, all you have to do is what tomorrow?
You go to your home precinct anytime between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., bring 2 pieces of identification, one with your current address on it, and you can register and vote at the same time. And if you're 17, and you're going to be 18 before November 6th, which is the general election, you can now register and vote as a 17-year-old.
In the primary?
In the primary.
And how do people find out what their local polling place is?
Well, we mail to everybody, but the best way would be is to go online, okay? If you live in suburban Cook, go to cookcountyclerk.com. If you live in the city, go to chicagoelections.com, or just frankly call around. But don't be confused, because sometimes, school right across the street may not be your precinct. You may see the flag,
point, yeah.
but it may not be yours, because sometimes the street may be the dividing line.
Right. So one of the things that we have in Illinois and around the country are very local election authorities. So if you're listening to us and you're in DuPage County or Lake County or Kane County, start with Google and just do, what would you think, Kane County and election, or use your county and election and clerk?
Yeah, most of my colleagues in all those counties, the clerks, have very similar things. They have good websites. They have information about how you find out where you're voting. So look at the clerk's website in any of those townships, in those counties, and you can find the same thing.
Okay, so that is our kind of public service thing. So you can find out to vote. This is a new era in allowing yourself to vote if you haven't done anything beforehand. And let's remind people who, again, may be new to the process, you do have to pick a side in Illinois. You have to, or what are the options you have in a primary? Can you help explain
What happens in Illinois is that you have a choice. You can take a Republican ballot, a Democratic ballot, in some cases a Green Party ballot. There's not many candidates in the Green Party ballot. But you have a choice, and let's say tomorrow you would take a Democratic ballot, but next primary you take a Republican. You don't have to worry about that. You're not committed a lifetime. It's just what ballot you want today. And that's important, because people don't want to be labeled. And so we tell our judges, don't say, what's your party? Instead we try and say, what ballot would you like today?
Hey, that's a real important point, because especially in this highly political environment that we're in right now, people who might be newcomers to the process will say, you mean I have to choose? I wanted to vote for this person for Attorney General and that person for Governor, but you can't do that.
You can't now. You can, of course, in November.
Yeah.
But there's a party primary, and there's big debates about that. You know, one side says, well, let those party faithful decide. But realistically, for example, at the county level, all the Democrats that win Tuesday are going to be elected in November. So the decision really is tomorrow. So if you don't go in the primary battle, you're not involved in electing the major countywide offices.
Well, that's interesting. So as we wrap this up, one of the things that has been such a big concern throughout the country and here is the security of our election systems. Russian hacking, we know that Illinois had some incursion by an outside nation last year, though no information was taken. Do we have anything to worry about in election security in Cook County?
Well, I think we're going to be fine, but I would say, of course, we worry. It's our job to worry. We do all sorts of testing, risk assessments every day. We're working carefully with Homeland Security and the FBI and others. We're all very serious about security, and we put out a white paper on it. But here's the key to understand, is that no matter what happens, whether we got hacked or something else, we still can put together, because we have paper ballots for everything. If you vote on the so-called touchscreen, you do like all this, the paper record is still the official record, and we have that. And if you vote on paper, the paper ballots, we have that. So we can always put together an exact replica of the election.
Important to know. So David, after 38 years in public service, I've covered you for many of them. I want to wish you the best after this election, the November election, for your next chapter in life. And as I bid you would do, we're going to be seating our next panel. So happy Election Day Eve to you.
Thank you, Lynn. I've admired your good work for a long time, so keep it up.
Well, thank you very much. And again, let me welcome everybody to the Chicago Sun-Times first ever election special. This is Election Eve. We'll also be coming to you again tomorrow night, starting, I think, around 6:30. I think it is 6:30. This is the first time we're doing this. And I just want to pick up on one thing that Cook County Clerk David Orr said to people out there. If you have not registered to vote, this is a new era in Illinois voting. You could just Google around, find where your election place is, put in your county clerk and the name of your county, and you'll be able to find where your polling place is. Then you go there, bring some identification, and you'll be able to sign up to vote. The other thing I thought that what David Orr said that was very interesting is that no matter what you might worry about in election security, there still will be a paper trail in Cook County. So just to recap, we're going to be coming to you live tomorrow night from our West Loop election headquarters. We're going to give you analysis, we're going to give you the latest returns, and hopefully we're going to give you a lot of expert insight too. We're going to have our Sun-Times reporters joining us, that is before they have their deadline, and then they'll be coming back to us now. Now in just another moment, we'll be bringing to you our first panel. We're going to try and mix it up in the next bit of time as you're watching. Republicans and Democrats are going to bring in you experts from all over the place. And I now want to welcome, and here's one thing before I introduce our panel, since I'm all for having everybody the same height, if you want to take a moment before I introduce you to get your seat up.
How's that?
A little more, even a little more, a little more, a little more. There we go. Okay, now, joining me more, my experts, we have Eric Elk, longtime Republican operative, and then I have Rakisha Phelan, who's a longtime Democratic operative. And folks, these people are fluent in politics. This is their language, the two of them, even though they're on different parties, right? You two could talk. You're fluent in statewide politics. You know about turnout, you know about messaging, you know about strategy. They both have worked on a lot of campaigns. They know the stuff. You know, someone like Eric, he hasn't, we've been trying to, I've been trying to get stuff from him for years. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So let me just say, though, I hope...
It's not just you.
So what I want to know now is, you know, David Orr talked about this early vote. Would you two, first you, Keisha, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow? Do you think we really will have some kind of big Democratic turnout here?
I think we're seeing a lot of energy on the Democratic side, and I was asking around a little bit about that today, and it's of course, we know the numbers on the early vote, and of course that's going to translate, we think, into overall turnout being up. And it's just what is accounting for that? What is accounting for the Democratic energy? And there are a lot of people that are just eager to cast that first vote in sort of their anti-Trump mindset. Is this their first opportunity to start down that road? And so there's a lot of energy still around that, even though he's not on the ballot.
And I wrote a column about it today that Trump is a factor in both parties in different ways. And we'll get to how Trump plays in the Republican side in a minute. So we've heard a lot post-Trump. We had the Women's March right after he was inaugurated. We had another one this year. We had the Invisibles, the Resistance. When you say there's Democratic energy, are we talking about Democrats who vote all the time anyway energy, or are we talking about what?
Well, it'd be interesting to see. We know the folks that are going to come out that are normally coming out, but I think what we're going to see is energy that's going to bring out more young people. It's going to bring out more women, and hopefully it's also translating into an increase in the African American vote. You know, they've got some options to look at there, but we see that energy really on that side of things.
Well, and it's interesting because on the Democratic ballot, you have diversity. In that 8-person Democratic Attorney General race,
Right.
On it, you've got a lot going on to jazz up voters. But now let's look at the Trump factor. How does it play on the Republican side in turnout?
I think it definitely could play. I think it's something that I think all candidates are probably thinking about in the back of their mind. No question. I mean, it's just like a number of candidates that we saw even in Pennsylvania, the way they're thinking about Nancy Pelosi. I mean, our candidates are thinking about the impact of Trump, no question.
Well, so that's interesting because Democrats were helped in turnout in Virginia, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania recently. So as a Republican strategist, would you think in Illinois tomorrow this will help more Republicans come out even though it's a primary?
I think folks want to come out. No question. I think that there's a lot of energy on the Democrat side. You have a very competitive Democrat gubernatorial race. You have a very competitive Attorney General race right now. I don't know that, Jeannie Ives has just recently started to come on. I mean, she, got her money from Dick Uihlein and really started to spend on some of that, but you really haven't had a lot of energy from their side recently.
But so I want to test this theory on you. That Jeannie Ives is competitive. She started late. Rauner has millions upon millions. He's been the governor. She is running as unabashedly pro-Trump. Rauner,
in a blue state.
In a blue state, and Rauner, and this is me, not Eric. Rauner's wobbly on Trump. Me, not Eric. Okay, so even though looking at these numbers for suburban Cook County, they still show a robust Republican turnout. Is this helping Rauner? Is this helping Ives? What's your analysis?
I think it'll help. It'll help the governor. It'll help Rauner. I think that what happens, though, in some of these suburban communities or the collars that you mentioned, folks can't take it for granted. Folks have to work. Folks have to turn out. And, each of their campaigns need to get their base out. They need to turn out as many people as they can. For so long, I'm from Lake County, and we saw this where it became a switch. For so long it was a Republican county, and it's not so much the case anymore. You even saw that in DuPage, where you have, folks like Congressman Roscoe. Hillary Clinton got, 7% or won by 7 points in his district. It's not, you can't take that for granted. They have to work.
So let's game this out a little bit. What are the races that you think this is like a game, I'll take it at lunch no matter who wins. What race do you think will be the biggest surprise tomorrow night? Okay, first on the Democratic side.
Biggest surprise.
Yeah, and we have county races, state rep, what do you think?
I don't know that it'll be any surprises tomorrow, but I think there's a chance that there are going to be some races that are closer than we expected. And I think, one in particular, the governor's race, obviously JB's had a substantial lead from the beginning, but, watching the surge of Kennedy in the last month or so has been interesting to watch. And we still don't know exactly how close that's going to be. be. And then I think also on the governor's side, but on the Republican side, there's an interesting conversation that's being had among suburban Republican women, and trying to get a sense of where they're going to break is going to be interesting. I don't think it will be Ives, given her stance on Trump and also on some other issues. But at the same time, Governor Rauner took some action on a guns issue that doesn't necessarily endear him to that. So I feel like the board is scrambled a bit.
Actually, you brought up a very good point. I want to bounce off you. So if you're a swing suburban woman, kind of tend towards Republican, that is your suburban woman vote that all the Republicans have to worry about keeping.
Sure.
So the Rauner signed. What is the shorthand? SB 40? Is that
HB 40?
HB 40. It's making it easier to be paid for some Medicaid abortion-related services, and on guns. In your analysis, do you think this will keep that swing Republican woman within the Republican fold tomorrow?
It may give them some heartburn, but I think it will. I mean, I think some who have a big concern on, the issues that were outlined in HB 40, as well as, the gun issue is a big issue for a lot of people. I mean, after what just took place down in Florida, I think a lot of moms and dads have an issue with security, and that's something they're thinking about.
So it's interesting because these are issues, on the abortion issue, in my experience is often what voters want is just somebody take a side and stick to it.
Correct.
Just, some people will be for you and some won't. So how do you think that in the Republican governor's race, how important do you think abortion is as an issue? I mean, I believe that's what animated Jeannie Ives to get in the race.
It's fine, but when the governor ran, everybody knew where he was. That he was pro-choice. He made no bones about it. So this is not a surprise. This was not something that he sprung on people or something
That's
like that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
He was very upfront about it. There were a big women's group who took out a page in the newspaper, the letter thanking him for his position on this when he was running back in 2014. So this is not something new.
So why did it take her so long to get in the race then? If that was not, if a pro-life Republican
You're
all the
asking
time
me to get inside the head of somebody
to analyze.
I just can't do it. I mean, that's great. Yeah, I can't do that. But I do think it did take her a while, and who knows what it was. She thinks that she's got a better shot at, fighting the speaker, which I disagree on. I mean, we're looking at one of the most expensive gubernatorial races in history.
Oh my God! There's a technical term. It's called Weismer. Oy vey, this money that Rauner and Pritzker are spending, it is astounding. I think one analyst told me that by the time this could be over in the general, that is if let's say if JB won and Rauner won, it would be more expensive than some presidential campaigns in past years.
I'd put it up around $300 million this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. But let's go back. There's a race where I'm going to go to you first because
Sure.
you're in the 3rd Congressional District Democratic primary. Dan Lipinski, Marie Newman. This is. I'm going to let you think about it since you're the Democrat here. This is where you have a pro-life Democrat, abortion right Democrat, a big Democratic family feud with a lot of outside money coming in. So since this isn't your party, your analysis maybe just is sought after. How do you think it might come down out there?
I think it'll be interesting. I think both sides are really battling this out. The one thing I will say, only from personal experience, having worked on the Hill both in the House and in the Senate, is that Congressman Lipinski was always very good about working across the aisle.
Yes.
He was never very partisan. He was, willing to work on an issue that was going to benefit his state, his district, and his country. And so, from that standpoint, that's my viewpoint. That's how I've always viewed both his father and
Right.
Congressman Lipinski. Is not being very partisan, but wanting to just get something done and move the ball forward on issues.
Right. So given that, though, one of the things that animate the Marie Newman forces, though, is and each of them have just a long, heartfelt position on abortion. So
Right.
how do you, what's your analysis of the third Democratic primary?
Right. You know, it's really easy to divide the candidates here on choice. But the truth is that there's a broader group of issues that Lipinski has been kind of on the wrong side of the Trump side of things here. We can look at healthcare, we can look at Dreamers, so it's not just a choice issue, which is why Newman and others are being
Yeah.
pretty effective in labeling him
Right,
kind
so
of the Trump Democrat.
it is some policy differences, not just a willingness to work across the aisle, which is
which you know that's
something.
commendable. We need
Yeah.
more of that in politics. But for people to make the Lipinski argument just about abortion is much more broad than that. We can look at how it's responsive to Dreamers, how it's responsive to healthcare and Obamacare, and he's got a lot of explaining to do.
Okay, so hold these thoughts. Both of these panelists will be back later in our first ever election show from the Chicago Sun-Times. We're going to get some other people seated. I think they're here somewhere. We're a little, this is a little whatever. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Take off your mics, and we have the next panel coming in. So tomorrow, remember, if you've never taken a vote before, if you haven't registered, you don't have to do any of that anymore. You could do everything the same day. We just had Cook County Clerk David Orr here telling us how to do it. You bring some identification. If you don't, you have to go to your polling place. Now, if you don't know where your polling place is, that's why we have Google. Put in some keywords like election, where is my polling place, put in the name of your county, and then you can, go from there. It takes a little work, but I bet within 5 minutes of Googling, you could figure out where to go. Now, if you see the table moving around a little bit, it's because we're getting our next panel seated, and I have to collect myself for 1 minute here as to who is coming in because I'm a little crazy. Actually, we're going to be back with our next panel in a minute because Eric, you're going to be coming back, right? Yes. Another thing that people could look at if you really kind of are still a little betwixt and between in what to do, the Chicago Sun-Times has a terrific voting guide on the contested races. If you go to suntimes.com, you'll be able to get a lot of information for both the Republican and Democratic biggest contested contests. So we're back now with another expert panel. Returning is Republican analyst, strategist, statewide expert Eric Elk, and now we have Democratic pollster Brian Stryker. Both of you have been involved in Illinois races, and you're polling for races, which ones now?
Candidates Daniel Biss for governor, Jesse Ruiz for attorney general, some different folks for county board and Congress and other races across the state.
So I want you here because as a pollster, you've got your hands on the pulse of what people are thinking, what motivates them. So give me a sense of what are the motivating issues? What are the things that are making people move? And if they're different for the county, and this is Cook County races we're talking about, kind of break down from a pollster's perspective what you see out there.
Yeah, so I think that the assessor's race has its own kind of world because it's a very...
Assessor, that is Cook County Assessor Joe Barrios and his fight for political survival against political newcomer Fritz Kagan.
Yeah.
And you're working for Kagan.
Neither.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're just analyzing.
Yeah.
Forgive me. Okay,
No
your
problem.
analysis.
That race has its own sort of issue because it's so focused on property taxes because
Yeah.
that's what the assessor's job is. But I would say outside of that, for example, the county board races, a lot of the state races, and we see this all over the country, so I do polling for candidates across the Midwest and the country. I mean, healthcare really is the top issue for Democratic primary voters and all voters right now, at least general election voters. Just sort of animating, and on the county level, that ends up being a lot about the county health system, about mental health, about Medicaid.
Really? But I've been hearing about soda pop.
Wow. It's a big
you're
issue in
surprised?
Cook County. I hear it might be coming back
Yeah.
after this election. So, that's at least, 4 or 5 of the candidates between Fritchie, Boykin, Deere, Stan Moore. Those are big targets, I believe.
Right. In fact, let's just, so we have lots of money, far more than usual, that's being spent if we could stay on it. And we have the biggest races stem from challengers from that soda pop tax that Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle she got it, then it was repealed. People hated that tax. Oh, my did they hate it. Because you know why? My theory is, if you paid, if you're like me and you wait until there's a sale at the Jewel and you want to pay 99 cents for your for your liter of Coke, I don't want to pay 50 or 60, whatever it was, cents of tax on it. It brought it home. You might pay. One of the things we're waiting to see with the tax cut that we have under Trump and the Republicans brought us is if it will be appreciated in the polls, but you might not see it right away.
Right.
But so it's different. It's like, what do you?
I think
Is there
with the
different
soda
psychology
tax,
here?
it was hitting people everywhere they went, whether they were at Starbucks, whether they were at the grocery store, going through the drive-through window at a fast food place. Everywhere they went, it was impacting them.
Right. So this is a big issue in the Richard Boykin, Brandon Johnson race on it, and then the other big one is for John Fritchie and hold on, guys,
Bridget Degman,
So
I do the polling for in the 12th district.
on that,
One thing I can say without speaking to any individual race
Yeah.
is I think the soda tax was very salient as it was going through the legislative process, but we have seen that in election context it's been a little bit removed and people maybe are forgetting about the price at the grocery store. Other issues have become more salient for voters thinking about how they're voting in this primary.
but in Cook County, people don't really focus a lot on what the county does. My
Right.
first beat, by the way, was covering the Cook County Board a while back on it. Can you discern from polling, though, what will make an undecided voter decided?
I think it depends race to race, and a lot of it has to do with candidates and personalities. I do think on the issue front, you have two big line items for the county on the spending side, which are the jails and then the health facilities, and often those interact, right, with the jails having to play a big role in mental health. So kind of the issues can intertwine, but those seem to be the two more salient issues. And then you have in some of these races sort of a partisan dynamic coming into it where folks are trying to pin one person or another as not sufficiently democratic, not sufficiently progressive, which also certainly is playing a role in this year up and down the ballot, whether you're talking about U.S. Senate or City Council of
Right, well,
sufficient.
that's what I was talking about. One of the things we'll know on Tuesday night, who will win, the progressives or the Democratic establishment. We have kind of an example of that on your Republican side, and I'm using it as an example. Maybe you have a bigger one. House Republican leader Jim Durkin is being challenged by the Dan Proft Republicans. Can you explain what the politics are going on there, what went on there to create that kerfuffle?
Well, I mean, again, you're asking me to get in the mind of somebody that I don't know that I can with
Okay,
Dan
well,
Proft, but
just from what enough you
But I think
observe.
that
Yeah.
finding a mayor who had quite a bit of baggage to run against the leader. They've got Mickey Straub in. He's the Burr Ridge mayor. My guess is I feel very confident that Leader Durkin will win his re-election tomorrow night without too much problem. It'll probably be an early night for him. I think that part of the issue was Dan Proft and the Tillman and the IPI crowd.
Explain what that is to our viewers who might not know.
The Illinois Policy Institute. This midsummer, when the governor had a little bit of a changeover in his staff, a lot of the Illinois Policy Institute folks went in, and very quickly after they were there, they were also walked out. And I think there's some bad blood.
Right. And Illinois Policy Institute leans towards more conservative Republicans, or how would we just let people know what part of the Republican family that might be different from Rauner, the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much, I guess you can say conservative, but anymore, people who claim to be conservatives also want to have tariffs on trade and things. So
Yeah.
I'm very careful to label conservative anymore. I think that part of it stems from Dan's being upset with Leader Durkin and the way he was running his caucus and able to withstand vetoes and overrule some things. So I think that's a big part of it. It wasn't because He didn't like Jim Durkin as a person. He wants to control that caucus. Dan Proft does.
So here's what I don't get in a way. So it's an inter-family feud.
Yeah.
There's a lot of real money being spent. This is a race that, frankly, if you think that
Absolutely.
Durkin is strong enough, why don't the Republicans, no matter their intra-family battles, save the money to fight some Democrats in November? Why do this?
Because some folks would rather try to be right than win. And so, they'd rather make a point or a statement. I mean, these are folks who have typically always been on the outside, not part of the establishment or whatever, and want to make their case. And they have someone who's willing to give millions of dollars, and Dick Uihlein gives millions of dollars to do these races. And frankly, I'm not sure. He's a smart businessman. He's made millions of dollars, but at some point, he's got to look at the ROI on this. I mean,
ROI.
the return on investment.
Yes. And so if people don't know, we're talking about one of the biggest, probably lesser known, never in the public eye. I'd be shocked if he came in for an interview. I've been trying to get him for years. Richard Uihlein, who lives in Lake Forest and who is a major Republican donor, and he had been with Rauner when Rauner ran for the first time, and now there is this divide. I am just talking about now, turning back to you on political messaging. Rauner, a zillionaire. Pritzker, a zillionaire. Chris Kennedy, merely a multimillionaire. So Dan Biss has this message. I'm the middle class guy who might have to actually worry about money on it. As political messaging goes, and I know I'm guessing you're kind of in that camp, but just if you could analyze it, when you have people this rich, could it be a backlash against money?
So I will say that I think the way you framed it as sort of voters saying this is a middle class person who understands what I'm going through.
This is what Daniel Biss is saying.
Yeah, this is
his
Daniel
message.
Biss,
Yeah.
exactly. It really resonates with people, and I think maybe even more so than the negative of it, of the sort of this person's too rich and they don't care, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the idea that you're electing a regular person, you're electing someone who worries about taxes and schools and healthcare and all the things that we all sort of worry about pocketbook-wise, it's clearly salient. I mean, if you look at a guy who's running against a Kennedy and a billionaire and he's in the race, right, it's clearly a message that's sort of moving voters for sure.
So what do you think is the biggest message of Governor Rauner as just somebody who is a Republican who listens? And then what do you think is the biggest message of Jeannie Ives as they end up this election?
Look, I think Rauner's been the one person standing between a lot of bad things happening in this state, fighting the Speaker of the House. You see now even Democrats running for state office are starting to use Madigan in their mail pieces, saying that they are not tied or allied with the Speaker. I think it's important to realize that Governor Rauner has withstood a lot of heat, taken a lot of heat for a lot of positions, no question. However, he has been, he ran and said this is what he was going to do, and that's what he's starting to do or been trying to do. So this wasn't a surprise to anyone. He ran on these issues saying that he was going to do these things and fight the Speaker, and that's what he's been trying to do.
Okay, so his message, fighting Mike Madigan, the Illinois House Speaker, and the chairman of the Democratic Party of Illinois. How would you synthesize Jeannie Ives' message?
I'm not sure.
That's telling, because you're listening. You're the Republican ears.
Look, I think she is communicating to a very narrow, very small group with a myopic focus on the items that they care about when they go to vote.
Interesting. So
I would say, Jeannie Ives, look, there's this idea of a dog whistle in politics of like making a coded appeal to race or other cultural grievances. I think Jeannie's just using a whistle. Like, it's pretty straight out and open. Like, everyone can hear it. It's not hidden what she's trying to do. We've all seen that ad and sort of.
Well, that was a
horrible sort of
controversial ad,
yeah.
but it did serve. She got criticism, but does my panel agree it got her name out there, good or bad?
Yeah.
Of course it did, and then she doubled down with it.
Yeah, I think it's a message that has purchase in the Republican Party right now. Whether it gets her to 50% or not, I don't know, but look at the president.
I don't think that's representative of the Republican Party.
I think it sounds a lot like the president.
It may sound like the president, but I think there's a lot of people speaking out against the president.
Well, we'll see.
This is not the Republican Party that I've been part of for years. So.
Well, we'll be talking a lot tomorrow too. If there is a Trump factor in the returns, we're going to have our next panel coming in.
Great.
Thank you for joining us. We'll know also soon if all this excitement ginned up by either Trump or not Trump or the progressives at war, if they really do jazz up turnout, or if indeed with these big early voting numbers, if it's just a matter that people like the convenience of voting early. So while you take off your mics and we get our next panel on, let me once again remind people that this is Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. I'm speaking to you live from the Sun-Times headquarters at 30 North Racine in Chicago's West Loop. Behind me, the hard-working people of the Chicago Sun-Times putting together the Tuesday paper, all our digital and web products. It all happens here, live in the newsroom at 30 North Racine. We'll be coming to you live tomorrow night from 6:30 on, giving you election results, analysis, and maybe some more prognosticating about the road ahead in the November general election. And once again, if you're just joining us now, if you want to vote tomorrow and you're not registered, remember we have new laws in Illinois. You could just bring some identification, go to your polling place. This is what Google is for, by the way. You put in, where do I vote? Put in your county and you'll figure out soon where you should go to your polling place to vote. We know that we have some big numbers in the early vote coming out of Chicago and Cook County. We don't know yet if that's going to translate into a bigger overall voting turnout. We know that we have big elections on both the Democratic and Republican side, and we know now, and we'll see what this means, that a lot more Democrats in suburban Cook County, thought of in the past as Republican strongholds, we have just a lot more Democrats there. So again, we'll see soon, but now we have another panel. Joining me now and returning is Rakisha Phelan. And forgive me if I have mispronounced your name. Did I say it right?
I take everything but felon, so you're good.
Okay. An expert on statewide races. As a Democrat, he's worked on everything from statewide on down. And now we have a political newcomer, but what I have to just say, this is Dwayne Hirsch, who is the youngest elected official in the state of Illinois. You're a Republican and a member of the Bannockburn School Board. So I guess congratulations to you. How old are you?
So thank you. So I'm 19 years old, so I just turned 19 2 days ago. So I was elected last year at 18 years old to the Bannockburn School Board in District 106.
As a Republican, and now you're a freshman at the University of Illinois in
I'm a freshman at the
Champaign?
University of Illinois. So it's a nonpartisan position, but I am a Republican.
Right, so first of all, when we talk about getting out the vote, if you had engaged youth voters like this, you are a rarity, I believe. But let me start out. We've been talking a lot on election eve about turnout. From what you see being on campus, we have big statewide races. Give us a feel if you think students are jazzed up about voting.
Yes, so absolutely. So I think that when we're talking about turnout in this upcoming election with young people, you obviously see on both sides, you see some enthusiasm and some people, kind of disheartened by the situation of what's going on. You see so much negativity. I think you get a lot of people who are interested in voting, who want to vote, who want to partake in their civic duty, help turn the state around, but it can be really difficult to get over the negativity and take part of that and choose which side is the good side in this. Obviously on the Democratic side, you see a lot of people down at school supporting Daniel Biss. You see a lot of people doing that, but at the same time, a lot of his message is the same as what Bruce Brower's message was 4 years ago, and I think that resonates too, is that this state, we have some major issues, we need some big changes. We obviously disagree on what the outcome is and what should be done, but just the diagnostic part of it, there's a lot of similarities, and that's really, I think, what young people are looking at. That in the next years, they'll have to leave, or else they need to, if it doesn't.
Lead or leave, that's your message.
Absolutely.
Ooh, you're harsh. But hold your thought a second, because our statewide expert, you mentioned Daniel Biss. 3 Democrats running for governor, J.B. Pritzker, Chris Kennedy, and Daniel Biss. If Biss wins, my analysis is he will have to win the college counties. Champaign County, University of Illinois, Illinois State University. You would have Eastern and Western.
Right.
Tell me how you think that might play out as an analyst.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
it will be interesting tomorrow to watch either way where the youth vote breaks on both sides, Republican and Democrat. And I have a feeling if there's any part of this election that's about being anti-establishment, that's something that could benefit this. It could benefit even Kennedy. We don't think about Kennedy as being someone who's outside of the establishment, but in this race he is. And then of course on the Republican side, Rauner continues to carry that anti-establishment message. The system is broken and we need to fix it. So it's really interesting. There's a through line of anti-establishment even in the assessor's race. So it will be really interesting to see how the youth vote and younger voters sway that either way.
Okay, so now, bear with me because we're going to talk about the Democratic assessor's race for a minute. This is fascinating because the establishment has come around and embraced Assessor Joe Barrios, and J.B. Pritzker now has kind of thrown in. He tried to lock up the establishment early on. So with all this progressive energy, the new voters that we think that are coming in, what does this mean, do you think, to the Republican establishment? You're a messaging specialist and a strategist. How does this play into it?
Not that I can really speak to Republican strategy when it comes to
but about the
communications,
Democrats, yeah.
but honestly,
on the Democratic side, with
this
what's going
is
on.
not unlike what we heard from Bruce Rauner 4 years ago. It's not unlike what we heard from Donald Trump just 1 year ago. This groundswell of the system is broken and we need new people and a new system.
But we're hearing it on the Democratic
But now you're hearing
side.
it on the Democratic side. It'll be really interesting to see how that breaks when it comes to the governor's race. Obviously, JV's had the infrastructure and the ability to be able to churn out lots of the vote here, but it'll be interesting to see if there's any part of those undecideds, which is still rather large. We're still looking at maybe 16%.
What is it people still want to know? It's election eve. What is it, everyone who's undecided, what is it you still need to know? What do you think?
Well, there is a line of thought that says that maybe some of those folks are the folks that are disenchanted with establishment. So that will be one thing to watch. But yeah, 1 week out from the election, or now we're just a day out from the election, and still seeing that large block speaks to the fact that people aren't just looking for the safe vote.
So that's interesting. Now, I think there's fewer undecideds on the Republican side, but when you look at this Jeannie Ives, pro-Trump, anti-abortion wing of the Republican Party, and then the Rauner, who I know he's straddling the fence on it. What do you think is the Trump factor as you analyze the vote tomorrow, as it impacts Illinois?
Absolutely. When we look at the Republican primary, it's different than statewide. I mean, there's obviously a lot of pro-Trump people. That's kind of still the base of the party, quite frankly. But when you're looking at undecided voters who are saying, Jeannie Ives, maybe she's more conservative, but maybe she's not what would best represent the state. When you're looking at her campaign that's been put on, the ad that was put out, obviously the super controversial one.
Yeah.
I think that turned off a lot of undecided voters. The typical suburban Republican voters, and especially young people too, who see that and say, that's not the direction we need to be going in. So when we talk about Trump, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think that at the end of the day, that's going to be the base. So we'll see how many of those Trump people say we're going to vote for the person who lines up with us, or are we going to vote for the person who probably gives the best chance to compete statewide.
So there's another name out there that is being used to animate voters, and that is Mike Madigan, the longest-serving legislative House Speaker, I think, in our nation, the chairman of the state party, the father of Lisa Madigan, the Attorney General, who is stepping down. So he is, Democrats are running against Madigan. Certainly, it's a huge message of Governor Rauner. Let me ask you first. What do you think is the Madigan factor in this primary election?
It's hard to tell because it's not actually a new tactic, and it's been for the last couple of cycles. It's just been run against Madigan because Madigan. So we haven't seen that be effective in previous election cycles. So it'll be really interesting to see if this year moves the needle in any way. I don't think they're taking any chances, but this is not new. It's not a new tactic. So it'll be interesting to see if it actually is.
I agree, first of all, because I don't know if a lot of people, he might have high name recognition, but when you say Trump, and I know I'm saying this to Republican, like Trump or not, you kind of get when somebody says, Trump, I'm going to go vote because of Trump. That isn't always a compliment around Democratic turf, but you kind of get what they're talking about. Can you imagine if somebody said, that Madigan, I'm going to vote because of Madigan, a lot of people might say, I don't, you got to help me out here. What do you mean? So what do you think the Madigan factor is in motivating Republican voters?
I think that obviously that's one of, Madigan's become the issue, I guess, in Republican politics over the last several cycles.
Yeah.
But really, even when you look at these primaries, one tactic that's been used to kind of discredit a lot of different candidates in state legislative races and things like that is to try to tie everybody to Madigan. I think that you need to have a message. I think that's what, moving forward past on March 21st on Wednesday, is that the Republican Party needs to say, this isn't about just anti-Madigan. We're for this, we're for that. It can't just be an anti-Madigan message. Although, it gets the base out and it gets people out. People are upset with the state. He's an easy scapegoat, but, you got to be more than just that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't blame voters for being confused if they're not paying attention. Watching the shows with a lot of adjacencies with political commercials, even Cook County judges are running ads where they say, I'm anti-Trump. It's like, or in direct mail. I've been I had 2 friends who've been saving their political mail for me, and it's a half a pound just in 1 week on it. What do you think is the most effective form of political communication between digital and cable and digital video and standalone ads? What in 2018 is a way to get a message out?
I tell you hate to say that TV matters that much, but if you don't have money to run TV statewide, you're in trouble. So I think it's still probably the most effective.
But that's so
medium.
throwback. That's like telling me beta tape or vinyl. It's still broadcast TV.
But it's still working.
Uh-huh. And your thought as we close this segment on what's the best form of political communication?
When we're talking statewide, obviously TV is a big
Still
thing.
is.
Really, at the end of the day, it's about getting to people's doors, talking to people, make sure that they know the message, and that's really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, especially in these local and more localized.
So even though you're the generation that's tethered to your iPhone and digital this and that, so getting a recommendation from a friend, an old-fashioned way, might influence
that
a
goes
vote.
further than seeing just one Facebook ad or an Instagram ad. It's
Well-
really about, if my friends tell me for this reason and this reason to go vote for certain candidates, I think that's really
Especially if you're a little low information voter on that race.
Absolutely.
If you had somebody who
Especially.
you trust, say, especially by God and Cook County judges, but even in your primary, if you just weren't sure, you would trust somebody more than saying, I'm going to review every ad that somebody
Absolutely.
put out.
And
Well,
the ads,
interesting.
everybody knows the ads aren't always the most
Okay, so we're
accurate.
going to end on this thing that people may trust their friends and their acquaintances more than all these ads we've been seeing. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get another panel seated here. I'll let you take off your mics yourself. Let me recap. Again, this is Lynn Sweet. I'm the Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief, but I'm here in the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom in our news headquarters in Chicago's West Loop 30 North Racine. If you're just joining us now behind me, well, you see the newsroom. Our digital operation, our print operation, our video operation, we got it all. We got every platform here. And we'll be coming to you tomorrow night starting at 6:30 for our election night show. We'll be giving you election results, analysis, and a look ahead at the November election. So our next panel is getting strapped up, and I do want to remind everyone, I just think it's so important. I've said this a few times in this show. If you don't have to worry in 2018 in this primary. If you haven't registered to vote, we have some new rules. Just figure out where your polling place is and go. But you will have to decide if you're a Republican, Democrat, or in some places a Green Party. Now, if you're a first-time voter, you might find this kind of a weird system, but that's why they call it a primary. So joining us now, returning, is our Republican expert, Eric Elk. And here's just a very knowledgeable Democratic activist, Dwayne Hirsch. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. Let's start with some turnout predictions in this, our last segment before we say goodnight until tomorrow. Dwayne, what do you think is going to be our the turnout? We know the early vote may or may not show people jazzed up. What do you think?
Well, I think if the weather's good tomorrow and things kind of work out that way, small factors oftentimes can play into whether or not people actually get out to the polls. I think folks have every reason to get out to the polls. Of course, we'd all love it to be a big turnout. I'd love to see a big turnout, though, from informed voters.
What does that mean when you mean informed voters?
Voters who really know what the issues are, they really know what these candidates are about, and their vote for that candidate. If you have a lot of people in the election and everybody wants to register to vote, but if you send uninformed voters into the polls, then we become subject to what they vote for, and they don't necessarily know
Well,
the issues.
in this case, on the Democratic side, oh, thank you,
Thank
Marcus.
you, sir.
Marcus, let's give a hand to Marcus, everybody.
right.
Thank you. In this case, though, there's not a lot of time left. We have a great Sun-Times voter guide. Go to suntimes.com and you'll see it there. But the Democrats in all these races are not very far apart. So, what do you think is going to be some of the motivating factors then? And frankly, you see what I see.
Right.
A lot of the candidates in Attorney General on the Democratic side, and especially J.B. Pritzker, they spent their last days campaigning in the African American community.
Yes.
So is that going to be a community that you think turns out in big numbers, mild numbers? What's your prognostication
I think
there?
the numbers would be somewhere in the middle. You know, J.B. Pritzker spent a ton of money in the race particularly,
Yeah.
but I know he spent a lot in the African American community on the south side and west side of Chicago, and it hasn't really done that much for him in terms of separating him that much from his opponents in the polls, at least so far. So we'll see how much that really pays off, but I think he's going to get a lot of people out that are specifically there to vote for and support him. And sometimes when the polls are closer, people know that, hey, I got to get out if I
Yeah.
want my guy to win. So that might be a good thing for him in the long run.
Well, it is amazing that he's been on TV for more than 40 weeks.
Yes.
He's been spending tens of millions, and that, you know, it still looks like if he wins, it will be a plurality win. We'll get to you in one moment on it. Is there a sense that this Blagojevich tape that came out, do you think that was a turning point at all for the J.B. Pritzker campaign?
It was a turning point in the sense that people saw that two ways, right? So some people were very upset with him and decided that they wouldn't vote for him. Others saw it as a leverageable moment where they could use that to now say, now you're definitely going to deal with our issues, you're definitely going to address our issues, and you're going to do so in a direct and very succinct way and not let him, you know, kind of wiggle out of that. So I think it put a lot more pressure on him to do more for the people that he's claiming that he's doing so much for.
Interesting. So now, Eric, in the last segment of the show, I came to you as our Republican expert. Can you, as the observer of the Democratic governor primary, how would you kind of evaluate the campaign and the messages and what Daniel Biss, Chris Kennedy, and J.B. Pritzker's been doing?
I think it's really interesting that, you know, polling, you know, a week ago, even 2 weeks ago, still had really high undecideds in this race. To your point earlier, JB's been spending a ton of money, been on TV for 40-some weeks. You know, he's approaching, what, $69 million in this race now?
His own money.
Yes, his own money. And Daniel, you know, he's not put away Daniel Biss or Chris Kennedy. They're still hanging in there and actually doing pretty well with all the amount of money that JB has spent. So it'll be interesting. He comes out of this primary in the mid-40s. What does that say? You know, spend that much money and only get in the mid-40s.
Well, so
you may be looking at two gubernatorial candidates going, you know, post-election that are both a little wounded or damaged. You know, both maybe didn't score very high in their primary. Both have spent a decent amount of money. JB obviously spent more, but you know, in the end, in November, we're going to have a really expensive general election campaign guaranteed here in this state.
well, that would be true, actually, no matter, I think, I'm just trying this out. If Rauner wins, he has many, we'll see if this rich donor network of Republicans who right now may be a little not on his side, but he's got a lot of money in JB, but I would think that the Democratic community has targeted Rauner as one of their knockoffs. I would think that money will come to whoever it is. But I just want you to maybe go a little deeper and think, do you think that this Democratic primary in Illinois has exposed rifts within the Democratic Party, or has it just brought the Democratic Party closer because everybody feels free to speak? And then I'll get to you in a moment to that question. What do you think?
Look, I definitely think, you know, from the national perspective even, both institutions, both party apparatuses have fundamental flaws with them. I think that, you know, I think the Democrats could stand new leadership. It'll be interesting to see if they were to take the House back. Does Nancy Pelosi get elected Speaker? And there's a lot of folks who are running against her that are in her own party.
And looking ahead to November, Democrats need to seize 23 Republican seats
Correct.
to take it back. But when you talk about new leadership, one of the other offices on the ballot in Illinois is for Democratic committeemen. This is a group of 36 people, 18 women, 18 men, who, when they're elected, will soon after elect a new state party chairman, too, who is Mike Madigan, who has been caught up in the Me Too Times Out sexual harassment issues. As I start winding up this segment, can you kind of summarize, before we say goodbye, where you think this election has left us in terms of the Democratic Party rifts coming together, or what?
Well, there's definitely some rifts there. There's a lot, particularly in the assessor's race. And what's happening is that you have people that are becoming disenchanted with those that are endorsing people who are clearly not doing the will of the people, particularly like in that assessor's race. Even in the county president's race with Toni Preckwinkle and all of the fallout from the sugar tax. So a lot of people were very upset about that, but she's getting some high-level endorsements, including the former president recently endorsing her, and that's got a lot of people upset.
The former alderman who's running against her, we'll see if she can put it away early tomorrow night, or if it would be a stunning upset if Bob Fioretti, the former alderman, were to win. And we'll be covering tomorrow night upsets or people who clinch early. I want to thank Eric Elk, our Republican expert, Dwayne Hirsch, our Democrat. We're closing out this first inaugural edition of our Sun-Times election coverage. I'm Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau. Really, I'm of the Sun-Times here in our new Sun-Times West Loop headquarters. Thanks for joining us tonight, and see you tomorrow.